Today, I'm going to unbag Strategy and Tactics number 58, which featured the game Red Sun, Red Star, the Nomonhan Campaign, 1939. Now, uh, I mentioned earlier in my Coffee with Kilroy that this was going to be a World War II week. I like to do themed weeks when I can. If I can group my content together, whether it's explorations and reviews or after action reports or unboxings or unbaggings or whatever you have. When I can group those together into a themed week, I like to do that because I like consistency and organization and continuity as much as the next guy. So this is World War II week, and we're looking at a game that's in Asia, basically Northeast Asia. Why is this part of World War II? Well, it is. This is some of the earlier actions in World War II. This is the Soviet forces fighting against the Japanese forces over land that used to be owned by the Chinese. And eventually is owned by the Chinese. Interesting conflict. This conflict, or this area of the World War II conflict, is not as covered as much. Normally, when we look at Asia, it's always the Pacific theater, with U.S. and British and Japanese forces, or in the Dutch East Indies or the Australians. Sometimes you might get into, Japanese and Chinese, or India actions between the Japanese and the British, or even sometimes the Chinese Civil War between, the nationalist forces and the communists, and then turning their efforts to Japan, but not so much on Northeast Asia. So this is something that interests me, and it also, when we get to the game itself, I'll do a page turn and then kind of look at the game. I've got some interesting connections to this game as well. So with enough of that, let's get into this bag here and see what we have. While I'm doing that, if any of you have played this game, love to know your thoughts on it, how it plays. It's not a designer that I'm familiar with, and the game looks interesting. It looks, relatively, hex and counter, move and attack type stuff. But, there is some extra, chrome going on here. So enough of that. Let's pull out the game bits first. As with magazine games, you're going to get a map and you're going to get counters. We'll take a look at that here in a second. But with the magazine game, you get a magazine. So let's look at the magazine, which traditionally Strategy and Tactics and other war games magazines usually has an article specific to the conflict or the game that they are featuring. And so in this instance, there's an article on this conflict, which I really like, and that's good context. And then there'll be your standard fare articles, throughout. I typically like to pull the rules out of these magazines and put them in a kind of a clear envelope, how I store all my magazine games, or most of my magazine games, off to the side. And then when I punch the counters, I'll put them in baggies, and everything can stay in that envelope, and then the magazine goes on the shelf. The problem with Strategy and Tactics, especially some of the earlier ones, they weren't so easy to pull out. I mean, they overlap some pages, or they might have some content that it just wasn't a nice little pull out. The ones they have today, actually, the rules are self-contained. They're on like a little glue strip, that you pull that off, and it comes out easily. It's onto a piece of cardboard that's really kind of an advertisement for future articles or for future subscriptions of the magazine. So the rules come out really easy, and you just put them off to the side or store them with the game like I do. These, not so much. It's kind of hit or miss with all the old war game magazines, whether it's Strategy and Tactics or Command or Wargamer or the like. Some of those, the rules weren't consistent. And again, I started talking about consistency and continuity. Anyway, here's the cover of this. So you're going to have, here's that article that I was telling you about that features just this. Let's go in a little bit closer here. That just features talking about the game that's inside here. This is also talking about Desert Shield and Desert Storm. This is 1993, so we're looking back just a few years to Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So this will give you a little bit of a historical look, historical conflict. I mean, we know now probably a lot more now than we did 2 years after Desert Shield and Desert Storm, but you know, a lot of stuff happened since then. But interesting. So get a little bit of historical article there. Then you have the game, which is this is the rule set that's here, and then the designer is Mike Style. Then you have Leonardo da Vinci and the Renaissance military. That should be interesting. I do kind of want to look at that. I have a board game called Magnifico, which is basically Risk. It's a Risk board game, but it's with it's set in the Renaissance, and it's set with Da Vinci's weapons. You know, because he had designs for, you know, helicopters and tanks and all kinds of stuff. And so it's a Risk game set in the Renaissance, but it's as if it uses Da Vinci's weapons if they were ever really, you know, commercialized or brought to life. So it's a really interesting game. My son and I enjoyed playing it. It was just, you know, and it's got little minis. And it's got the, you know, based on his designs and stuff. I might need to cover that sometime, but I've got an article now to go with it. Maybe. Operation Leopard, the Axis conquest of the Leros Islands, November 43. So this is yet another article about war and conflict, which is what strategy and tactics is known to do. So here we're getting right into this article here, and gives you some, you know, setup and background of this campaign in Manchuria. And here's the part that is really interesting. That's kind of, when I was looking at this, was interesting to me, at least, maybe not so much to you, but this is the Northeast Asia, and so this is the border between Russia and let's see what we have here. If you look right here, sorry, put that down, put it back up again. So if you look right here, you got Harbin right there. So this is where the battle takes place. This is Nomonhan. But right here, you've got Harbin. This is USSR or Soviet Union. This is Japan moved in and took over Manchuria. And again, all this right now, most of this is modern day China. But that Harbin right there, that's where my wife was born. So this is in her neighborhood. But yeah, she was born there, and then grew up in Yantai, which is the Shandong province and the peninsula that kind of points towards Korea. Anyway, so here are the operations, you know, some maps talking about how the operation took place. And most of this is going to be just west of Nomonhan, and you'll see that on the map when we get to the game itself. But it covers the whole battle, opening moves. Oh, yeah. Another thing about this too is Zhukov was, you know, who's famous for the Eastern Front for the Russians. He was the overall command, I think, of these operations, or at least this is where he cut his teeth, so to speak. So you got this. Keep on going with the article here. Quite a bit on this article. And you got the Japanese occupation policy in the Second World War. So you have a little bit of a side article here. And that's another thing about these magazines, that, you know, you have an overall article, but then you might have little side vignettes that kind of go into a little bit more detail on stuff. And there you have it. That's the article. Then we got that Desert Shield article. Not as many images in here. You know, the modern day strategy and tactics and World at War that are produced by Decision Games. There's a lot more, you know, maps and images and graphs or charts and stuff. I mean, these older strategy and tactics, you get some, but, you know, there's a lot of text in here. So this is all that Desert Storm, and then we get into the rules themselves. So this is the rules right here, and I don't know if these can pull out exactly. You know, in the modern day, they actually have a little indication here where it says, you know, like R1, R2, so that's the rules, so you know exactly what's self-containing here. These older versions, it kept on numbering, so like the 28, 29, I mean, so if you pull these out, then you've got a huge gap, but of course you know where the gap went, hopefully. So I don't know if these are going to be able to be pulled out These might be. So I might be able to remove these because it looks like they're somewhat self-contained here. There is some errata in here for this game. That's kind of a novel. They produced the errata in the same magazine in which they released it. So probably last minute they found out the issue and they put it in the very back, but I'll get to that here in a second. So these I might be able to pull out. So it's a matter of just pulling out these two staples, pulling this out, putting this with the rules, and then this magazine can go on the shelf. And I know they try to do that in most things, but sometimes that just didn't happen. We'll come back to the rules here in a second. Let's look at the rest of these articles. This is Leonardo da Vinci, military Renaissance military. Not a super. That's kind of interesting. But as you can see here, mostly text. Then you got a chronology here. That's kind of cool. I need to compare that versus that Magnifico game. And then you have that last article. Then you have here's this errata that I wanted to show you that they were able to find. So there were some missing counters for the Japanese. There's the front and here's the back. So something like this, I would imagine I'd probably make a copy of this and then probably put it on a sticker sheet and then apply these, and there you have it. I'll make my own little counters for this, so I'm not missing out on anything. And most of these, as you can see here, are like for the tracks, keeping track of stuff. So anyways, let's go back to the rules real quick here. The other downside with magazine games, or major several downsides, but another major downside is all your charts and tables, are in here, so any kind of holding boxes or charts or tables, are in the rules itself. So you're going to really have to make a copy of it. There's no player aid. So you're going to have to make a copy of that or do something different so you can see that. Otherwise, you're just flipping through the rules all the time. And you can see this is not just a 5 or 10 page rule book. This is, relatively involved rules for this game. Some of the more, and they do try to put a lot of the charts on the map, and some of the modern or the present day magazine games try to put as much as possible on there. I do like that. It gets a little crowded, but for a big map, it's a lot of charts and tables, but at least you're not referring to, the rules all the time or have to make your own player aids. So, which some people really like doing that. So here's your rules. You got introduction, game equipment, sequence of play, force adjustment, artillery fire, ground combat, movement, zones of control, stacking, supply, bridges, air operations, operational, scenarios, and design and play notes. So there you have that. Here's some counter errata. I wonder if that is caught in this back here. But that's another dig on magazine games is, there's a rush to publication. So, they're constantly trying to, they have a schedule to upkeep and they're trying to get this pushed out the door. So the schedule to produce a magazine game is a lot shorter and condensed than it is to produce a boxed game. And so this doesn't get the same review, development, and more importantly, probably not the same play testing. So that's where you're going to get either some quirks in the rules that weren't caught in play testing or just not caught in review. And that was always a big dig about magazine games, that they're just not the same level of board games or box games. But anyway, my mileage has varied on that. I've found some games I really like and were good. And yeah, there's a few little quirks everywhere, but almost every game has some errata. So do magazine games have more? Yeah, generally, but there you have it. So this is 3 columns. There's not going to be a lot of examples or images in here. This is 1993, so you don't have, again, a lot of examples of play, images or playthroughs or anything like that. Especially, you're not going to have that in a magazine game for the most part. But back then, that was kind of unheard of. So those are all the different rules. And then you get in, these are these charts that I was saying this is kind of your player aid. So you're going to need to make a separate copy of this if you want to get to this easily. Or I guess, this is in the middle of it all. So when you pull these out, then you can just pull these out separately. But you're still going to need to make copies because this looks like this is a holding box here. So this is something you want to lay on the board or have off to the side, because this is your holding boxes for different things like bombing and air attack. So this is like your air displays, right? Which is an optional rule, I believe. But you also have Mongolia reinforcements, air combat results, Japanese reinforcements and withdrawal. So this is something that you probably want to have out, and it's got stuff on the backside that has charts as well. So definitely probably this is a pull out, but probably also want to make a copy of some of this stuff, because here's your counter battery table, interdiction table, bombardment table, marker effects summary, artillery support, hasty attacks, and ground combat. All right there. Continuing on, and we have supply here. So this is going to be a little bit more operational. Whenever you see supply, at least whenever I see supply, I'm thinking operational aspects of the game as opposed to just a pure, battle or tactical type game. Then you have some scenarios here. And then there is an example of play, but again, there's no diagrams that go with it. You just have a narrative example of play, talking about artillery fire and prepared combat. So not really a full, but just more of a little peek at those different mechanisms. Design and play notes right here, and they said, I was looking at the rules at the very beginning. It said that they have solo rules as needed. I don't know if there's actually solo rules in here, but I'd have to go back and look at that. But it said at the very beginning that that there was solo rules, and so I don't know if that's just rules to help you play this two-handed. It says rules for beginners in solitaire play are provided as needed. So that's interesting. The beginners, I understand. You might have stuff like this is the basic rule, then there are advanced rules, but the solitaire play, I don't see that very often. I don't know if this is truly solitaire or if it's just, some ways to deal with maybe hidden information or like that. So there's the rules. I probably will pull those out. Then I'll have to make a copy of the counters there. And there you have it. So now let's get to the good stuff. This is what you came for, right? What's all that stuff? That was all appetizer. We need to get into the map and counters. So I'm going to do this first, though. Let's look at the counters while I got a close-up here. So here are the counters. They're thin. This is typical, of magazine games of the day. The magazine games today have a little bit thicker counters. Against the Odds have a lot thicker counters. But these are relatively thin. They'll punch out. You might have some nibs and stuff. So, people, the compulsive types will probably clip those. I'm not a big clipper, and I have a lot of these games that have a ton of nibs, and I do have clippers now. Hardwolf can finally convince me to get some clippers. But for me to go back and clip all the games, I got a lot of games. For me to go back and clip all those, I'd rather spend my time playing, because I don't. We all have, as you get older, you start realizing you have limited time on this earth, and I got to allocate my resources. So here are the counters here. As you can see, yellow and red. And the Soviets are red and the Japanese are yellow. Not going to say anything about that. You have some administrative type markers here. Then you have the flip side. But they're dual color. That's kind of cool. So, for 1993, this isn't horrible. You got NATO symbols, which is typical in a lot of these games. So there you have it. So there are the counters, sans the errata that we have to make ourselves. So unless we're going to probably have to go up Periscope, and I'm probably going to do this landscape size here. Let's go up a little bit here. See how much of this can we see. There we have it here. So you've got some charts up here, your turn record, track explanations, your combat effectiveness, your combat results table, your CRT, column shifts, your terrain chart over there. So and then you've got your turn track here facing this way. So read it this way. Plus you got your USSR Mongolia records track here. And then the map, this is a Mark Simonich map. Very nice. I mean, it's very clear, something that you come to expect with a 7-inch map. I mean, everything's clearly laid out on the different types of terrain on here. You can see it here. You've got, some marsh and a river, and you've got some lakes throughout here, and some hills or higher terrain. What are they called? They're called hills. Very nice. You have roads. I thought there was a train network coming through here. But, and then you've got, as you can see here, you've got way up there, right there, you've got Nomonhan. And so all this is taking place on this side of Nomonhan. So I mean, I like the map. It's a very I think it's a perfectly fine looking map. And you got charts on here. You have some holding boxes that are again in the rules, but there you have it for the map purposes. Let's go in a little bit closer on some of these things so you can see the map even better here. So there is Nomonhan. You have some areas here mapped out, like this is D, this is F, this is H. Those might be, I don't know if those are part of victory conditions or setup or what have you on that. I just haven't got into the rules as much. So, and then if you're looking at this, where does this fit on the larger scale? Harbin, my wife's birth city would be that direction, right there. Is there a compass on here? Yeah, here's it. So this is so that would be that's east over here, and because north is that way, as you can see from the compass rose up there. Anyway, so there you have it. This is what you get in a magazine of Strategy and Tactics number 158, Red Sun, Red Star, the Nomonhan Campaign, 1939. Again, I like magazine games because of you have context in the bag with it. When you buy a board game or a box game, there's usually sometimes there's a historical book or there's notes in there about the history of it, but sometimes not as much, right? And this one always generally is going to have an article specific to that topic that gives you context, and that's why I play these games, is to learn more and explore the history in a tactile sense. And then you get what all you need. You get the map, counters. You don't get the player aids, but you do get something that is serviceable for most part. But the main reason is it covers battles and conflicts, or magazine games generally cover battles and conflicts that aren't covered as much. You're not, we all have a Bulge game or a Gettysburg game or a Waterloo game or even a Market Garden game or a D-Day game or what have you, right? Those are done to death. This conflict here, not so much, right? And the conflicts that started this whole, around this whole area, not so much. You have was it Quack and Goal? I think that might be part of this whole campaign, or this might be another name for that. But of course, I totally butchered that. But those conflicts, need attention as well. They give some understanding to it. Plus, I have a little bit, as I found out, a little bit closer connection to this whole region to explore as well. Anyway, that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for stopping by. The best way I know that you stopped by is drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. What do you think about magazine games? What do you think about this game specifically? What do you think about covering aspects of World War II or other conflicts that aren't covered as much? And all that's fair game. Love to know what your thoughts are. And again, thanks for stopping by on World War II week. Check out tomorrow. If you're watching this weeks later, then what the heck am I talking about? But tomorrow I've got a special offering because it's a special day. Tomorrow's my birthday. So anyway, take care. Have a good one. Thanks for watching.